My name is Sarah. It was a late fall weekend when I decided to take my caravan out for a solo trip. I'd been craving the peace of nature, the quiet hum of the road, and the solace that came with being alone. I chose a secluded campsite deep in the woods, far from civilization, thinking it would be the perfect escape from my busy life. As I set up camp, the chill of the evening air wrapped around me, and the forest seemed to hold a strange stillness. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep purple hue. I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees around me were watching, as if they knew something I'd in single quotes too. By the time I finished setting up my fire pit, it was dark. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of leaves. That's when I noticed something odd. Another caravan, parked a little farther down the path, barely visible through the trees. It wasn't there when I first arrived. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed a flashlight and made my way toward it. As I approached, I noticed the door to the caravan was slightly ajar. I called out, expecting to find someone, maybe another solo traveler, but there was no answer. I pushed open the door, and the interior was eerily still, like it hadn't been touched in years. There were no personal belongings, no sign of life, just dust and empty shelves. I stepped inside to investigate further, but stopped when I noticed something strange. A pair of boots near the door, as if someone had stepped out and left in a hurry. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I couldn't leave without knowing what had happened. I stepped back outside, looking around the campsite for any sign of the person who owned the caravan. But the forest remained silent. The next morning, I woke up to find the caravan gone. No trace of it, no sign that it had ever been there at all. I checked the path leading in and out of the woods, but there was no evidence that anyone had passed through. I still don't know what happened that night. Whether it was a trick of my mind or something more sinister, I can't say for sure. But I haven't been back to that campsite since. Some things are better left unexplained. My name is Max, and I've always loved the open road. My caravan was my home away from home, a place where I could escape the noise and the chaos of everyday life. Last summer, I decided to take a solo trip to a remote mountain range, hoping to find peace and quiet among the towering pines. I arrived at the campsite late in the afternoon, just as the sun was setting behind the peaks. The place was secluded, nestled deep in the forest, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the occasional bird call to break the silence. It was perfect, or so I thought. As I set up my caravan, I noticed a faint whispering sound in the air, almost like voices carried by the wind. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, just on the edge of my hearing. I brushed it off as my imagination, the wind playing tricks on me, but the sound didn't go away. That night, as I lay in bed, the whispering grew louder. It was no longer just a faint murmur. I could clearly hear words, though they were unintelligible. I opened the caravan's door, hoping to find some explanation, but there was nothing, just the dark, still forest. The next morning, the whispers were gone, but the feeling of unease remained. I decided to explore the area, hoping to clear my head. As I walked through the woods, I stumbled upon a strange clearing, unlike any I had seen before. The trees around it were twisted, their branches bent at unnatural angles. The ground was covered in dry leaves and scattered stones. But what caught my attention was the old, weathered stone circle in the center of the clearing. It looked ancient, as though it had been there for centuries. I stepped closer to examine it, but as I did, the whispering returned. This time, it was louder, more urgent, and the words seemed to make sense. Leave, or it will take you. I froze in place, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly turned around and rushed back to my caravan, not looking back until I was safely inside. That night, the whispers grew louder than ever, now accompanied by soft scratching noises at the caravan's walls. The wind outside had picked up, but it sounded like someone or something was trying to get in. By morning, I had packed my things and left, never looking back. I don't know what I encountered that night, but I never returned to those mountains. Some places, I've learned, should be avoided, and some whispers should never be answered. My name is Luke. A few months ago, I took my old caravan out for what I thought would be a relaxing weekend getaway. I'd been cooped up with work for too long and needed a break from the city. So, I decided to head down a quiet, forgotten road, far off the beaten path, in search of solitude. The road was narrow and winding, with no other vehicles in sight. The trees along the road seemed to close in as I drove, their branches reaching like long fingers toward the sky. I kept driving, convinced that I had found the perfect escape. By the time I reached my destination, the sun was dipping below the horizon, and the forest around me was shrouded in darkness. I parked my caravan beside an old, abandoned gas station, the faded signs barely visible in the dimming light. As I set up camp, I noticed something strange. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, like the world itself was holding its breath. I shrugged it off and went about my evening, enjoying the stillness of the forest. But as night fell, I started to hear things. Soft knocks on the caravan's walls, followed by a faint scratching sound, like something was trying to get in. I opened the door to check, but there was nothing there. No animals, no people, just the eerie silence of the forest. I locked the door and went back inside, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. As the night wore on, the noises became louder, more persistent. At one point, I swear I heard a voice calling out from the wood, soft, faint, almost like a whisper, but unmistakably human. It was so clear that I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, convinced someone had wandered onto my camp. But the forest was empty. I went back inside, more unsettled than ever. I tried to sleep, but the whispers continued, growing louder and closer. It was as if they were coming from inside the caravan itself. I could hear footsteps, too slow and deliberate, as though someone was walking in the space just outside my door. Then, in the dead of night, the caravan shook violently, as though something massive had slammed into it. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and opened the door, but there was no sign of anyone. I packed up and left at first light, never looking back. I've never gone near that road again, and I don't ever plan to. Some places, I've learned, are better left alone. My name is Ethan. Last summer, I decided to take my family on a road trip across the country in our new caravan. We had always enjoyed the open road, the freedom of the journey, and the adventure it promised. Our destination was a secluded lakeside campground, far from the hustle of the city. We reached our destination after several hours on a narrow, winding road, bordered by thick forest. The campsite was far removed from any towns or villages, a perfect place to disconnect from the world. As we settled in for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The forest surrounding the campsite was too quiet, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps outside the caravan. I tried to ignore it, but they grew louder, getting closer to the window. My heart raced as I peered out, but there was nothing there, just the shadows of trees dancing in the wind. I tried to dismiss it as an animal or the wind playing tricks, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, I mentioned it to my wife, Claire, but she dismissed my concerns. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. As the sun set, the same strange silence filled the air. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, they were accompanied by a low, drawn-out whisper, like someone was calling my name. I jumped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty campsite. But then I saw a figure in the distance, standing motionless by the trees. My heart pounded as I called out to it, but it didn't respond. The figure just stood there, unmoving. I wanted to run, but something held me in place. It was as though I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the night, leaving only the soft rustling of the trees in its wake. The next morning, we packed up and left without a word. As we drove away, I glanced back one last time. There, in the distance, by the same spot where the figure had stood, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a pair of eyes watching me from the darkness. We've never gone back to that road, and I never will. Some places should remain forgotten, and some encounters should never be revisited. My name is Olivia. When my partner Marcus and I bought an old caravan to escape the chaos of the city, we never imagined that our retreat would become a stage for unspeakable terror. We parked our beloved caravan on the edge of a dense forest, drawn by its eerie quiet and the promise of solitude. The caravan, though weathered, carried a charm that whispered of bygone days and forgotten secrets. The first night was peaceful, filled with the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant cry of an unknown creature. Yet, as midnight approached, a subtle disturbance awakened something within the shadows. At first, I dismissed the odd creaks and murmurs as the natural settling of the caravan. But soon, strange echoes began to manifest, whispers that seemed to seep from the very walls. Lying in bed, I could swear I heard a voice softly reciting my name, over and over, as though it were a prayer or a curse. I nudged Marcus awake, but he too was uncertain, insisting that fatigue was playing tricks on our minds. The atmosphere grew oppressive, and sleep evaded us as the night deepened. Determined to uncover the source, I rose with a trembling resolve and stepped into the narrow corridor. The beam of my flashlight danced along peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards. In a small corner near the back, I discovered an old, dust-covered trunk, its brass latch tarnished with age. My heart pounded as I approached it. An inexplicable compulsion urged me to open it. Inside lay a collection of yellowed letters and faded photographs, all chronicling a long-forgotten family whose tragic end had been shrouded in mystery. Among the documents, one letter stood out. Its ink, smeared by time, contained a single sentence. "The echoes of our sorrow will forever haunt this place." I retreated to Marcus, who listened in stunned silence as I recounted my discovery. That very night, the whispers returned, more insistent and desperate. The voice, now unmistakably mournful, seemed to rise from the very floor beneath our feet. Every creak, every gust of wind carried a lament that resonated with our own hidden fears. As the hours ticked by, an overwhelming sensation of being trapped within a cycle of despair washed over me. I felt the presence of unseen souls, their anguish echoing through the confined space of the caravan. Marcus and I resolved to leave at first light, our plans shattered by the relentless dread that had taken hold. But when morning came, the caravan's door was ajar, as if inviting us to witness one final horror. Outside, the forest was unnaturally still. A trail of muddy footprints led from the door toward the trees, vanishing into darkness. With hearts heavy and minds racing, we gathered our belongings and fled, never daring to look back. To this day, I wonder if those echoes were the final cries of a lost family, or if our own despair had awakened something far more sinister, destined to follow us wherever we go. I still hear faint whispers when I close my eyes, soft echoes that remind me that some sorrows refuse to be forgotten, and some voices will haunt you long after the night has passed. My name is Leo. A few months ago, I bought an old caravan to take my dog, Max, and myself on weekend getaways. After a few trips, I decided to take a longer journey through a remote part of the countryside, where I knew I'd find nothing but quiet forests and open fields. I parked the caravan near a small, isolated lake, far from any towns or roads. It was the perfect spot, peaceful and still. As I set up camp, I noticed something strange in the sky. The stars were unusually bright, but there was also a faint, swirling light that I couldn't explain. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a trick of the light. That night, Max and I went to sleep, but I woke up to a strange noise, something tapping on the roof of the caravan. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but it was rhythmic, almost like footsteps. I looked outside, but there was no one there. I couldn't see anything moving in the darkness. I lay back down, but the tapping continued. I covered my ears with my pillow, hoping it would stop. After a few minutes, I heard another sound, a low hum, like a distant engine. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside to investigate. But when I turned it on, the light flickered and then went out. In the distance, I saw faint, glowing lights moving through the trees. They were too far to make out, but they seemed to be drifting toward me. I ran back to the caravan, locked the doors, and stayed awake until morning. The lights were gone by dawn, and everything was quiet again. But the strangest thing happened when I left the campsite. As I was packing up, I noticed the sky was darker than it had been the night before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Max and I haven't gone back to that place. I don't know what those lights were, but I don't think I ever want to find out. My name is Sarah. I've always loved the freedom of a road trip, especially in a caravan. My boyfriend, Tom, and I decided to spend a weekend away from the city, driving through the mountains in search of peace and quiet. We found a remote campsite, deep in the woods, a place where the road was barely more than a dirt path. There was no one else around. It felt perfect until night fell. As we settled into the caravan, I noticed something strange. Tom was acting a little off, staring out the window. I asked him what was wrong, but he just shook his head, saying it was nothing. We went to sleep, but in the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange feeling. It felt like we weren't alone. I sat up in bed and looked around. Everything was quiet, but then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the rearview mirror, I saw a figure standing outside the caravan. I couldn't see its face, just a dark shadow that didn't seem to move, but its presence was suffocating. "Tom," I whispered, but he didn't respond. He was still asleep, unaware of the figure standing just outside. I held my breath, not daring to move, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. The next morning, Tom and I went to check the area around the caravan. There was no sign of anyone, but when we looked at the rearview mirror, there was a handprint on the glass. We didn't stay another night. We packed up and left immediately. To this day, I never go camping without making sure all the mirrors are covered. My name is Jack. My wife, Emily, and I had just bought a new caravan, a little getaway from the city, to travel across the country. We'd heard the roads could be beautiful and full of adventure. We decided to take the first trip to the coast, somewhere isolated with nothing but miles of beach and the ocean breeze. The first night in the caravan, we parked right on the edge of a quiet, hidden cove. It was peaceful, far away from the noise of the world. Emily went to bed early, but I stayed up, reading a book by the light of a lantern. Then I heard it, a soft whispering. It was faint at first, like a breeze passing through the trees, but then the words became clearer. It sounded like someone calling my name, "Jack, Jack." I got up thinking it was someone outside. I opened the door, expecting to see a person, but there was no one. Just the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. I returned to the caravan, and when I told Emily about the whispering, she brushed it off. "Maybe it's the wind," she said, but I wasn't so sure. That night, the whispers returned. They were louder this time, and they seemed to be all around us. The next morning, Emily found a series of strange markings on the sand near our caravan, symbols drawn in the sand, ones we didn't recognize. We left that afternoon, and as we drove away, I looked back. On the horizon, I saw something dark standing near the water. I still hear the whispers sometimes, especially when I'm alone. They're always calling my name. My name is Grace. My family and I decided to take a road trip in our caravan through the mountains. It was a perfect plan, just the four of us. My husband, Dave, our 2 kids, and me. We drove 4 hours, and by the time we reached a remote camping area, it was already late. We set up camp under the stars, parked the caravan near a cliffside with a breathtaking view of the valley below. The kids were already asleep in their beds, and Dave and I were winding down for the night. But then I heard it. A soft knock on the side of the caravan. I thought it was the wind, but the knock came again. It was steady, like someone was waiting for us to answer. I told Dave to check it out, but he didn't hear anything. I figured I was just being paranoid. We went to bed, but the knocking didn't stop. It continued through the night, each knock more persistent than the last. In the morning, we checked outside, but there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no evidence. Just the cold, empty night. We left the campsite early, and as we drove down the mountain road, I glanced in the side mirror. For a moment, I saw a figure in the rear window of the caravan. It wasn't anyone from our family. The figure was dark, blurry, and unnaturally tall. I looked away for a second, and when I glanced back, the figure was gone. We never spoke about it again, but we haven't taken the caravan anywhere near those mountains since. Something was with us that night, and I'm certain it wasn't human. My name is Adam. My girlfriend, Kate, and I had always dreamed of taking a cross-country road trip, so when we finally bought a used caravan, we were beyond excited. It was small, old, but comfortable enough for 2 people. The first few days were perfect. We drove through national parks, stopped at small towns, and shared quiet nights under the stars. But one night, something felt off. We were parked in a remote area by a lake. Kate was asleep inside the caravan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I kept hearing faint footsteps outside, but when I stepped out to check, there was no one around. The next morning, I found strange, muddy footprints circling the caravan. They weren't human, they were larger and had claws. Kate didn't believe me when I showed her, and I wasn't sure what to make of it myself. That night, the footsteps returned, louder this time. Then, the caravan door rattled. I rushed outside with a flashlight, but again, there was no one there. I locked the doors, but all through the night, I could hear scratching noises against the walls. In the morning, the footprints were gone, but the feeling of being watched never left. We didn't stay another night. We packed up and left the next morning, but I know something was out there in the woods that night, and it's still waiting.